Welcome back to 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm your host, Seb Frey, and today's guest is the one and only Lincoln Stoller. Lincoln works at the intersection of creativity, discipline, personal development, and what I'd call intellectual independence. We are going to talk about what it really takes to pursue meaningful work when you feel underqualified, when people discourage you, and when you're not even sure who actually knows what they're talking about. If you've ever felt like you waited too long, played too small, or followed advice that didn't fit you, this conversation is for you. And without further ado, let's get into it. Today, I'm very excited to have Lincoln Stoller on the podcast with me here today. And full disclosure, I actually knew Lincoln Stoller decades ago. I want to say over 30 years ago. He and I both worked in a certain field of endeavor, database application development, and he was part of that community I was with. And when I saw Lincoln Stoller out on the internet and saw what he was up to today, I thought he would be an amazing fit for 60 Plus Uncensored. So Lincoln, I'm very excited that you are joining me here on the podcast today. For those who are not familiar with Lincoln Stoller, could you please share with our audience who you are and what you're about?
I don't know if I could. I could try.
Give it a shot.
But I don't, I just had a kind of podcast, or it was these pre-podcast interviews with a guy on betrayal and infidelity. And, some of these topics really get you thinking. So you know me from a phase in my life when I was a computer developer. I wrote an accounting system. I sold it, supported it, installed it, and was a consultant for its use. And you and I were involved with this company called 4D, which targeted a middle market, middle-sized business, which I subsequently thought was a bad idea. But, those decades went by. I mean, it had a growth problem, it's like focusing on products just for adolescents. It's like your clientele outgrew you at some point. So,
yeah, right.
Anyway, that was a kind of a middle phase of my life. I started, actually, mountaineering, which was a good idea. It's a good thing for kids to do something that requires responsibility. Maybe it was a little over the top, but people do like Boy Scouts. This was like an extreme version of Boy Scouts where you really could get the shit kicked out of you or killed. But
Oh, yeah.
It developed relationships. That was really the most important thing. Over the decades, I've appreciated that. You really have to make a commitment to be responsible and to think carefully and to be there for people. And that's pretty big for a 13-year-old. Most 13-year-olds don't get it. In fact, I think a lot of people never get it. So that was a good thing, and that went on to my 20s, and then I went to graduate school in physics. And I can't say much good about that. I think I would prefer engineers to scientists. The best scientists, in my opinion, have their feet on the ground and their hands on reality. And when you lose those two things, you get kind of weird. You get kind of narcissistic and egotistical and theoretical. And that's kind of the reputation of scientists. The mad scientist is like some guy who's gone overboard. So I met a lot of mad scientists. They weren't making Frankensteins. They were mostly just assholes. Anyway, it changes with the decades, too, because some of my early mentors were from the 1930s, and they were a completely different type of person from the industrialists of the 1980s. They were philosophers, not politicians. Anyway, that was another phase of my life, and that went on for another 10 years. And then, Lord knows, the mountaineering got me traveling, and the traveling got me interested in culture. So I started spending more time with cultures. and going to strange places that didn't necessarily have mountains but had interesting people. And I lived in the jungle, and I went to Mongolia, and this was interesting stuff. I got involved with musicians. I was never very good, but I got involved with sort of the production side, and I got my Mongolian musician friends hooked up with my American jazz friends, and they produced some albums and toured around. And then there was this interest in religion and culture and altered states of mind, because you have to understand that mountaineering and physics involve a certain altered state of mind. So I got involved in psychedelics and those sort of strange jungle potions that you make. And I tried my hand at making them. And it's not so easy, I don't have a green thumb. You have to have a really green thumb.
Well, hey, wait a second, because I'm into the jungle and psychedelics. What jungle were you in, or were you in various jungles?
Yeah, various ones. Well, I spent a month in the Panamanian jungle, but they weren't particularly psychedelic. That I just lived in the jungle. And then I went on these sort of ayahuasca tours to Costa Rica and Ecuador and Brazil. So that was more jungle. And those are kind of upper Amazon groups of people, the city of Iquitos and around there. And some really kind of wacky Eastern Western stuff where you'd get sort of expats from California joining with indigenous people from the jungle and having conferences where everybody took psychedelics. And it was like pre-psychology, before the time of psychedelic-assisted psychology.
Right, which is all the rage these days, right? I mean, like that has really come into mainstream psychotherapy. I take a lot of psychedelics in my 20s and late teens. Really, I was in the Grateful Dead, still am, but I don't do psychedelics really so much anymore. But I've never done ayahuasca before, and what's that like to go up into the jungle near Iquitos, which is Peru, right? Yeah. So, what's it like to go take ayahuasca in the jungle in Peru?
It depends who you're with. There are some people who are westernized and they're, organized and scheduled, and they have a website, and they're reliable and reproducible. And other people are kind of sketchy. They're more into the finances of it, and they sort of don't uphold the individual attention. And then we would also bring people up to New York and California who were indigenous people, and I didn't even think they had to smuggle in the ayahuasca, because nobody knew what it was, just a sort of a bottle of turgid looking liquid. And they would offer ceremonies in New York and California, New Jersey.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So yeah, I had one beautiful experience. This was actually my first ayahuasca experience. It was in New Jersey. It was hosted by a guy who was a Broadway opera singer, not opera, musical productions. And he brought the shaman from, some South American country who didn't speak English. And in the middle of the night, so the shaman's doing all these like little, Icaros and little musical things in the dark to people who are throwing up and groaning and moaning. And then somebody started singing a Broadway tune, and everyone in the dark joined in. And this whole rising chorus, I don't remember what the tune was, but some, popular song. And the shaman didn't know what was going on because he didn't know Broadway tunes. It was like it all got out of hand, and everyone got in this ecstatic state. And then it just kind of drifted away and disappeared. And so that's kind of what ayahuasca is. You can go from high to low very quickly, but it's difficult on your body, and it takes a long time, and you're pretty exhausted after it's over.
How long does the ayahuasca last? Is that like a 3 or 4 hour thing, or is that like a 12-hour thing?
Well, it peaks after 3 or 4 hours, but you're exhausted for the next 12.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so it ends up being 12 and you're sleeping 8 of them. And then you try to get your act together. It's a very sort of purgative and laxative, and, you poop and vomit and you feel somewhat dehydrated. And you kind of want to get your feet on the ground afterwards. And you psychologically want to bond and ground yourself. So some ceremonies are better than others in that they provide that. A talking circle or a comfortable place to relax and revitalize. And others are not good in that they throw you out as soon as the sun rises and you wander back home feeling discombobulated. So it's very hard to know what's a good deal. You really have to do your homework. It's true with all of this psychedelic stuff. I mean, I had a neighbor die because of fentanyl. So you don't screw around with this stuff. You have to know your sources. And there's a difference between therapeutic drugs and just street narcotics. And you
Right.
have to know this stuff.
And so you were or still are, I guess, a physicist, but you're also now a psychotherapist as well, correct?
Very much, yes.
How long have you been a psychotherapist for?
Well, it started with this, jungle touring stuff. Many people who joined me were therapists. And, this was before it was considered kosher to do it as therapy. And when was that? 1995. So that went on for a while. And then I got into hypnotherapy. Well, hypnosis has 2 branches. There's the spectacle kind, and then there's the therapeutic kind. So I was mostly interested in the therapeutic kind. And stuff like past life regression, which is a real kick, and it's very much like psychedelics. And that moved into, well, there's a crossover here. So there were psychologists doing psychedelics, and there were people doing psychedelics interested in personal transformation, and there were also people sort of riding the whole thing, testing, experimenting, and interviewing people. So I got involved with neurofeedback and brainwave training at the same time that we were doing psychedelics and meditations in the jungles. And that worked with my scientific background because I understood the engineering of brainwaves and amplifiers. So that was interesting, and it is quite different, and it is still not well appreciated. I think it's more powerful, well, more effective than psychedelics, just because it's easier to control and cheaper. And a lot of this stuff you have to learn. It's not just a one-time thing. So people who take psychedelics and think that they're going to have a silver bullet and have all their problems solved don't understand that there's a lot to work out. Psychedelics open the dam for a lot of experience, but you have to process it. So it's not a one-time thing, and you can't necessarily do it all by yourself. So I ended up joining, at around 2005, psychedelics with brain training. And we actually tried to do a kind of ecotourism thing that combined it, but we never got enough people to actually do it. We're going to do it in the jungle, but we didn't actually had it set up. So after that, I became, around 2010, 2015, certified as a counselor. So that took a year of dreary training, another more book learning and sort of academic farting around. And then you finally get to the good stuff, which is dealing with people and the high performers and the low performers. And that's what I'm doing now, with high performers more than low performers, just because that's what I advertise. I advertise getting your shit together, moving forward, accomplishing things. So if you're a schizophrenic, that might not, be your main issue. But I get a few of them too, and they're always very interesting. So that's where I am.
So describe your work with high performers, and what is a high performer? I mean, do you mean like just someone who makes a lot of money, or what is a high performer, and how do you work with them?
Well, two high performers I'm working with. One is a banker, a young man who's an investment banker. He was an athlete and was attracted to things that gave high rewards. And it's not a wonderful world. It's a world of a lot of competition and deception and exploitation and a lot of money. And he was smart enough to know that there were a lot of traps, wealth traps and obligation traps. And he's a high performer because he questions what he does. And he has the courage to put himself at risk to make changes in his life and his work. And he's reflective in terms of not needing to have his ass kissed or not needing quite so much reward all the time. So, there's more of an athlete's point of view. He's willing to suffer the pain of reconsideration. It's not dangerous in the sense that a high risk sport is dangerous. But he had that background and he knew what it took or what it takes. And the other one that I'm working with, who I call high performance, is a mountaineer who's just a total visionary kind of guy. He just loves to be in the mountains, and he loves to be, in the rain and the snow and the ice. And he basically burns out everybody he works with or climbs with because he's more in love with it than they are. And he doesn't make money, and he's always struggling to get out into the mountains because it's expensive to get, helicopters and airplanes and all the stuff you have to put together. And he often goes out alone because he can't get partners. And he's in these big remote mountains in these awful weather situations on these cliffs by himself. And he loves it. But, I'm always worried that, it's dangerous. So you never know in those situations if you're as safe as you think you are. There's been these avalanches in California, but there's actually much more. They're not as dangerous as you may think, because a wise person just avoids those areas completely. And the idea that a bunch of people could go out into the avalanche terrain and then get buried is like, yeah, what did you think was going to happen? But, most of my mountaineering friends, the ones that survived, were very cautious. So, this is what high performers are. They are people who take high risks, but they're reflective. They don't necessarily make a lot of money, but they pretty much move forward in whatever their project is. And so here, we're talking about 60 plus. I do think you have to have a vision. And if you don't have a vision and you reach 60, I'm now 70. And what are you left with? A mortgage, a lawn, grandchildren? To me, that seems pathetic, to lack a vision. And it's everybody can pursue their vision differently. You don't have to put yourself at risk, but I think it does involve a certain amount of isolation. A vision is something that's not easily shared. And it's also hard to find people who have vision. I guess there's not a lot of people with vision in my experience. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think very many people have vision at all. I think that most people would be described as ordinary, and nothing wrong with that, but there's only a few visionary people that I've really ever met. But what kind of work do you do with these high performers? Like what does that look like? I mean, are you taking ayahuasca with them, or are you doing just one-on-one, sort of like a traditional therapist with your armchair, and they're in the the whatever they sit in a therapist's office.
Well, we do.
What does that look like?
Well, it's not that surprising that most, or maybe any, high-performing person is going to be focused on relationships. They're either wondering why they're alone, or they're attempting to create relationship, sustain it, foster it. So the banker has decided to be married and have kids. So, as I tell them, don't approach your family the way you approach your clients. Don't deal with your children the way you deal with your employees. And he understands that. I mean, he has no trouble understanding that. The other guy, the alpinist, doesn't really understand why his relationships burn out. I'm not sure either. It seems that people are attracted to his more than visionary, his upbeat, optimistic, unquenchable drive. It's inspiring to people. But, liking the idea of Christopher Columbus and then going with Christopher Columbus are two different things. So he gets involved with people and he tries to take them along, and he finds they kind of peter out and they don't commit. And so the question with him is, what is commitment? You seem to have it naturally, comes to you naturally. Doesn't seem to come to a lot of other people, especially in romantic relationships. What are you committed to? Do you think you can write a contract? Do you think commitment is just a stated agreement? So this is kind of the kind of things you get involved with in high performance work. How do you collaborate with other people? What are your expectations? Do you foresee, or can you intuit other people's level of commitment? And I think a high-performing person often has that problem because they've spent their life with other high-performing people. And you really can't assume that. Then you get into things like business. How do you manage the innovator versus the manager? How do you know the difference? I found it when we were doing database work. It was always frustrating to work with the IT people who understood the problem and the resources required, in contrast to some of the executives who were just looking at the bottom line and how to give the least amount of resources to get the most reward. And talking to these people were like day and night. So that's the kind of issue, I think, to try to answer your question about working with high performers, is it's about judgment, developing judgment and intuition, applying it, your expectations, and living with the consequences, not being, if it's even possible, too pissed off at people who don't meet your expectations. So that's the bottom line. It's about relationships, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that everything. I think the key to success in many fields, maybe not physics necessarily, I don't know, but is relationships. But one thing that I'm always interested in is how we take ordinary people, which most people are ordinary. How do we give them just a little bit of a touch of the high performer? How do we give them a little bit of vision? Because I think there's a lot of people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s maybe, and they feel that there's really very little that life has to offer them anymore, right? They feel that they've met their biological imperative on Earth, and like they're just sitting back and waiting to be comfortable until the end, right? But I think that there's so much more that life has to offer. And many people find that their 60s, say, and probably some would say their 70s, are some of the most fulfilling years of their lives. And so what can like an ordinary person who's never really ascribed or you know reached for greatness, who's just tried to be like a decent human being their whole life, and they raise their kids in their 60s and they're in their 70s, what kind of things can they do to broaden their horizons and you know reclaim you know like a zest for life and like you know an urgency and an imperative to continue to grow as a human being in the later stages of life?
I think I don't quite know. I can't give you the answer I'd like to, which was like just do this or something like that.
Just like maybe a few breadcrumbs or a few a few
Well,
pointers.
one of the things that has struck me is that there's a lot of misinformation in terms of what you're capable of doing. So physics was a good example where you're told what the truth is, you're told who the greats are, and you're told what the nature of the problem is. And for the most part, it's all bullshit. Because that's what science is. Science is always overturning itself. So you've got to understand that most of what's considered true is wrong. Most of who you're told to listen to are not worth listening to. And most of the stuff that's going to be discovered is not yet evident. So anybody, if you have the tools, can do some interesting things. I mean, it's harder in physics because you got more tools to learn. Sure, I know. And, you know, you got this sort of problem that you're never sure you know enough. And if you start listening to people, everybody's making more complicated stories, and before you know it, you're too confused to do anything. But in other areas like art, you have a lot greater freedom. So, in fact, this has come up with my high-performing people. I say, well, take your guitar out into the garden and just play your guitar. Or go into the garage and start painting. And don't try to make it good. So there's this difference between doing something that's valuable and doing something that other people value. You know, you don't want other people to value something in order for you to make it, for you to feel it valuable. So my client who took my advice and went into his garage and started painting said it was really liberating. But then his wife came in and said, oh, that's really good. And now he's all fucked up because he's got to be good. And I said, you know, no, you don't want to be good. Don't let her in. Don't take credit from anyone. You're just doing it for yourself. And you just want to, you know, finger paint your way to relaxation. So I think, I mean, you could take up physics, but that's a long, tortured road. So you could take up a musical instrument. That's pretty easy. It's easy to do bad music, and it's actually not that hard to do good music either, at least stuff that you like. And I'd say the same with art, drawing, writing, podcasting. There are a lot of people podcasting these days, and it seems that a lot of them don't know what they're doing.
That'd be me.
No, I think you've got a focus, which is more than most people have. And, you know, you've got a goal. So, you know, that immediately makes you, it gives you a platform to stand on. So, I mean, of course it's important to think that you don't know what you're doing. That's essential. In order to, if you think you know what you're doing, then you probably don't. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're probably right. And that's where you want to be. If you want to do anything new, you won't know what you're doing. And neither will anyone else. And that's got to be okay. You've got to enjoy that. You know, pick up an instrument and make a mess. Pick up a pen, write stuff that's garbage. And it's an incremental process. That's how you learn. I mean, that's how you learn in relationships too. Sometimes, unfortunately, through failure. But another thing that I tell people, if they can grasp it, is to fail. I mean, we used to say this in software. Fail early and fail fast. And as I was writing the other day, a good software developer is not somebody who knows how to follow the rules. It's somebody who knows how to get around them. And it turns out that one of my main mountaineering mentors was a criminal. Well, no, criminals are people who are caught. He was a lawbreaker. He was never caught. And he had a lot of great lessons about safety and carefulness and confidence that were very much like an artist. He was an artist in lawbreaking. He was also a mountaineer, and I only learned about his lawbreaking by accident. There's right. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to say that, but
You can say anything. It's 60 plus uncensored. Go right ahead.
When I was a teenager, I was involved with shoplifting, and that moved into mountaineering, which was a more moral and more promising approach to risk-taking. And the returns were higher, and the risks were more controlled. So, but all of us are familiar with law-breaking. And, we do it all the time. We don't come to a complete stop at a stop sign. Who does that? And we like, generally, to take some responsibility in things. We could walk out of the grocery store with an apple in our pocket. And sometimes I do. But is this really meaningful? If you're trying to get a return and an experience of risk, do it with more courage. I don't mean do it with higher risk. Well, here's an interesting story. I had a couch surfing client who came to me from New York City. And incidentally, he said he and his friends wondered what would happen if they just started talking to people on the street of Manhattan. And so they put a signboard out in front of them in the Midtown and said, "Talk to me." And the question was, would anybody talk to them? I mean, this is New York City, famous for people ignoring everyone else. And it turned out that they had a line around the block of people who wanted to talk to them. And they spent the whole weekend talking to people on the street. And it was very out of character for what you might think. But on the other hand, it was clear that, especially in the city, people are starved for connection. So, here's something any older person can do. Start talking to people, because you know a lot more than you might give yourself credit for. And people are starved for wisdom, contact, sincerity, concern, insight. So we get down to service. I guess this is what a lot of older people do. They get involved with service, community service. And that's a good thing. But you can take it much further. You can invent it yourself, reinvent it. Like these kids from Manhattan, you could get a sandwich board that said, "Talk to me," and stand on a street corner. I mean, it'd be like standing there naked, but it would have some amazing results. You would have some amazing conversations, depending perhaps on what street corner you stood on. Because in this town, this is Victoria, British Columbia, the warmest city in Canada. So all the other cities ship their insane people here, all their street people, all their vagrants. So there's lots of schizophrenics on the street of Victoria. So if you put yourself out there to talk to people, you'd get some strange conversations. So, anyway.
Well, let me ask you this. You said you're just talking about how people in their 70s or their senior year, their later years or whatever, they look to do service, right, as a way to to give back or to grow or be of value. How about yourself? I mean, you're 70 years old. You look great, by the way. Doesn't look like you are headed to a rocking chair anytime soon. What do you see yourself doing for the next 10 years? How are you going to stay active and engaged and, contribute?
Well,
What's the plan?
it's interesting. Health has its weird things. Like I had a wisdom tooth that got infected, and then that left a hole into my sinuses called a fistula, and so I was getting sinus infections. And now I have a tooth next to it that I think needs to be removed. And when that tooth is removed, my health will improve, and I will probably get less sinus and bronchial infections, and I will get outside more. So I try to exercise a lot, sleep outdoors as much as possible. I gave up a house in New York when I moved to Canada. I aspire to getting a house here. I aspire to building a house, which is going to get harder and harder as I get older. But who knows? Why not? I like building.
You're going to build one physically yourself. You're going to put the hammer to the nail and build it yourself?
Yeah, well, there's different, I don't know how to use an excavator, so I'll probably have to get somebody to do that part. Or maybe not, but I mean, I think it would be somewhat dangerous to be a novice with an excavator. That would be
high
but
risk.
I'm willing to try anything. We'll see.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Give it a shot.
I can think of many reasons why not. But anyway, I need money. So I've got various projects. And I still have a 15-year-old kid who lives with me, my son.
Oh, cool. Right on.
That's nice. But he'll be gone in 3 years.
Yeah.
And I'll be sad. But I'll also be, I don't know what. So I think the idea is to make time and use time. I write a lot. I've been doing these podcasts. I don't know when they're going to generate a return because I don't know who's listening to them. But we'll see. I do have a message, just like you have a purpose. Like I say, my message is kind of high performance. Be a high performer. Shoot for the highest you can imagine. And you say, what gets people motivated? Well, death gets people motivated. I always found that as even a teenager. Death gets you motivated. And in fact, there are a lot of decisions I made which I regret. They were too high risk. I survived, but I don't like to think of them much. It was like not exactly as stupid as Russian roulette, but I mean, you can imagine if you played Russian roulette as a teenager and now you're 60, you'd think of it as incredibly stupid and wasteful. What's the return here? In mountaineering, there was a return. You got to the top, you accomplished something, you learned something, but you had to be careful. So what are you looking at now at the age of 60? Do your hips hurt? Do your knees hurt? Are you out of shape or overweight? Well, get your shit together as much as you can. Test your health, work on your health, and then use your health to either provide service, go on adventures. I mean, a lot of people haven't traveled. Travel is probably the most rewarding thing I can think of, the most bang for your buck. I mean, here's a story which I like to tell because anybody can do it. I wanted to go to Costa Rica. I wanted to learn about the country. I didn't want to go to a hotel where you just get, saunas and poolside and restaurants. So I called a hotel and I asked them for the name of a taxi driver. And they gave me a taxi driver. And I called the taxi driver and I said, do you know people or do you have family who would like to put me up for 2 weeks? And he said, sure, my parents. And so he picked me up at the airport and he took me to his parents in San Jose. And I lived with his parents. And that was unbelievably wonderful because they had kids and they had aunts and uncles. And we went to visit them in the jungle, and we went to visit their gay nephew who made alcohol out of honey in the jungle, and another cousin who worked on the Chiquita banana plantation, and all the normal people that you would never meet normally, who were real Costa Ricans. And what did this cost me? What, $20 a night, which was a lot of money for them. And anybody can do that. I mean, literally. I didn't even know the language very well. And it's even more fun. I went to Norway and tried the same thing. It was kind of too hard there because I knew no Norwegian and they knew no English. So dinner.
I thought everyone in Norway speaks English. Doesn't all Norwegians speak English?
Not where I went. Yeah,
where'd you go? Like the
I went
north,
to the Arctic.
The frozen Arctic.
Oh yeah.
Are they like native people up there essentially, like reindeer herders? Is that who's in the northern Arctic of Norway?
No, I didn't get to there. I didn't get that far. I mean, you look around, but it's an adventure. I didn't find the Sami people, but it would have been just as well. I would have had more to say to them in my in my gesticulating language. Anyway, maybe these are things that you do as a teenager, but that's no reason. I mean, I think a lot of people would love to hear what a 60-year-old person from, the Western world has to say about what's going on.
Well, I don't know why you wouldn't do it when you're in your 60s. I mean, I did. I mean, my first overseas trip, I was 18, 19. I went to Europe. Well, actually, I went to Australia when I was 13. But that was with the San Francisco Boys Chorus. But my first solo trip was to Europe when I was 18 or 19. And it was great. And I've done a lot of solo trips. And I don't know why you wouldn't do them when you're 60. I don't know, like what you just suggested is awesome. I mean, it's much better to travel that way than to stay in a hotel or take the bus tour or whatever, right? You go and you meet the people and you learn the culture and you have an authentic connection with a community and a society and individual people that you're just not going to get any other way. And how can you not help but grow from that experience?
Another example is, again, I think taxi drivers are the people to talk to. In Lima, Peru, which is a dangerous city, we talked to the taxi driver and said we wanted to know, normal people. So he took us to his family in the heart of dangerous Lima, and we learned that communities in Lima are very closed. They are the people who live in an apartment building or the people who live in a neighborhood, and they know each other and they protect each other, and the gangs know who they are, and they, avoid injuring them. And as a visitor, my family and I, were welcomed into the neighborhood of this little block in Lima, Peru. And in the apartment building, all the doors are open on the inside. And all the kids are running around and they're all playing ball and they're all running into each other's houses. And it's a whole big community like you wouldn't see in a Western country. It doesn't happen outside on the street. It's dangerous. Inside the building, it's a community. And we were welcomed into the community. And we were toured around all the different apartments in the building until we couldn't eat any more cookies. And my son just ran around playing with all the kids, even though he didn't speak any Spanish. It didn't matter. And again, you wouldn't see that. That's not on the bus tour. It's not even in the tour guide. You just wouldn't know unless you asked. And there's a certain risk because you don't know. Maybe you will end up staying in the hotel because you might not necessarily get an audience with the people who have a space for you. But anyway, I don't want to go too long. It's pretty obvious that if you reach into an area where there are especially interesting cultures, you'll probably make a connection with somebody, especially if you have something to offer. Money is an easy thing to offer, but wisdom and friendship are also available.
Right. I myself have a great deal of experience in Lima, Peru. My wife is Peruvian. I've been there. I probably lived in Lima for about 6 months or maybe more of my life. Just got back from Lima, Peru. We were there in January last month, and I know Lima, Peru very well. And I've been to many, many parts of Lima, Peru, which are not on the tour books. I've been to Lima, Peru, than more parts of Lima than most Limeños, I would say, and it's a terrific town. I have a great time, and it makes me think. What you're talking about makes me think about my first trip to Mexico as a solo traveler. I took Spanish in high school and I learned quite a bit of it, but I hadn't spoken it for 10 years, so I was like, I guess 27 or 28 when I went to that first trip to Mexico, and I had the best time ever of any vacation I'd had. I'd been to it by that time. I'd done quite a bit of traveling. But just having an authentic conversation with a taxi driver, actually, was a taxi driver was where it all began. And he gave me some pointers on where to go and what to see and what to do. And it really made such a big impact on how much I enjoyed my time by getting off the beaten path and going and meeting some real people. So I can't say enough about that idea. Do you think that's something you're going to do? I mean, your kid's 15. My kids are 14 and 16 right now, so we're kind of like in the same place, I guess. Are you going to do some more traveling, you think, when your kid goes off to college or wherever he or she's going to go?
I don't know. I really don't know. I've done a lot of traveling. I would like to feel settled and secure, and I don't feel that yet. And now, if I did feel settled and secure, would I travel? I don't know. I just don't know. I enjoy working with, as a counselor, working with high performance people, but I don't want to be an armchair. I don't want to be entirely an armchair participant. I don't know what I do. I really don't. Maybe that's a good thing. I'd like to build a house. That's a big project. You know, it's got a lot of risk. It's got a lot of expense. I mean, I'm looking at death in 20 years. I'd like to settle down and do some physics, some more physics. I don't know why exactly. It's kind of an itch I want to scratch. And I'm kind of feeling like I'm finished with some of the work, the hypnotherapy and the dream work and the psychedelics. Psychedelics are a kind of a shit show. There's a lot of problems. It's really out of the context of Western medicine. And I don't know. If you're going to travel, you have to be very forgiving with your time. There's a lot of time spent waiting around. If you have expectations, you're probably not going to get them met, or depending what your expectations are. Another thing that I did was my parents bought land and built a house in the Caribbean. And I would go down there on Christmas vacation. And I didn't want to hang around with my parents. So I would go into the fishing village and live there. And then, oh, it's a long story. But now my 15-year-old has never been there. And I'd like to get him there. Because now, you know, he lives in Canada and he lives in this, whatever this is, Generation Z or something. And they have their own attitudes about racism and sexism. And I'd love to get him into another culture that has different attitudes about community and race and wealth and knowledge. So one of my ideas is I would like to take him down to the Caribbean and back to the fishing villages and hang out with those people again. It's very different, you know. There's the women's culture and the men's culture and the drinking culture and the working culture and the adolescent culture. And they're all different from what you'll find here. This is Canada. It's very, people don't even lock their doors here, which is not entirely, it's almost too trusting. It's like it's so trusting that, you want to go out and scream. But that's one of the things I like about New York City. You can get into real gritty conversations with people who you don't even know, just because, what the hell? But here in Canada, everyone's very reserved and proper.
And polite. And I went to Victoria, Canada when I was 12 with that boys' chorus. We went on a trip and a Northwest tour, they called it, and Victoria was the northernmost point. And I haven't been back since, and I would love to go. It's a beautiful place, I know, and one day I'll get back there again. But I want to go back to one thing you mentioned. You said you have 20 more years to live and then you'll be dead. And so one thing we haven't really talked about very much at all ever yet, and I think we're like 38 episodes recorded so far of 60 Plus Uncensored, is death, right? And so, but you are a physicist, right? And you're also a psychotherapist, and you've done, some psychedelics and all that. You've thought about death. What do you think about death? What do you think, what happens when you die? Any clue? Does it matter? Just, what do you think about death?
I think death is the reminder to live. And one of the projects I'm working on now is to write a book on why people do high-risk sports. And I'm interviewing alpinists and backcountry skiers and base jumpers. The people who jump off bridges. And really the whole point of these activities is to live. I'm actually surprised at quite a variety of answers of what it means to live. But there's the enthusiasm, the vivacity, the engagement. It's sort of evanescent. It kind of evaporates quickly. Jumping out of an airplane is very full of energy. And you can see the whole arc of it, and then you come down and you settle down and you land and it's over. Well, that's kind of my idea about life, is you got to jump out of the door, because then it's going to settle down and finally reach the ground, and then it'll be over. So the time to use your resources is right now, or as they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So, and the second best time is today. So, to keep in mind that you're not going to get fitter or healthier or more able, but you don't necessarily need to be an athlete to engage in rewarding activity. But you do need to be committed and use your time well. So one of my problems is I can't get over my ex-wives. Maybe that's not a bad thing. There's still things to learn. But I'm still bitter about not having them in my life. Well, that was their decision, and it may be stupid on my part to want to re-engage with somebody who doesn't want to engage with me. But, that's part of the life issue. That's part of my struggle getting out the door. What do you want to leave behind? And what do you want to foster as something new? I would like more relationships, but I don't want trivial relationships. So I actually find therapy quite rewarding, because the only relationships I get involved with are the ones that are very meaningful. They're not personal relationships in the sense that I can't take them wherever I want them to go. I'm paid to take them where my clients want to go, and they don't necessarily want me along for the rest of their life. But I do get a view on what's important, and I have high standards, and I guess my standards are only going up as I get closer to the end of my life. So I don't really know how to answer that. Um, I'd like to get out more, but I produce a lot. So you could say that I'm very creative. And that's part of my answer to the question of what to do with life, is to be creative. You could be in service to people, or you could be a writer. I write a lot. Or the podcasts. I mean, I think what you're doing is part of the answer to your own question. You're being of service to people as elders. What to do? I wouldn't be surprised if you're finding it rewarding to just deal with these questions and feel that you're part of someone's answer. Am I right?
Well, I certainly feel it's very educational, and I've learned a lot. And one of my mentors, she says that's a great reason to do a podcast. Really, is to interview people and learn from them. And so for me, I think I get a lot more out of this than my guests do, honestly. But you also said just now about your ex-wives that you're having a hard time letting them go, and I think that a lot of people have that issue, right? They have a hard time letting go of all kinds of things, and it holds them back, especially later in life when you've had all this baggage that you've just accumulated for all your life experiences. But it kind of surprises me because you're a psychotherapist, right? I think psychotherapy is probably a lot about letting go, isn't it? Or am I wrong about that?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that's a dominant theme. I mean, progress seems to inevitably involve getting new things and letting go of old things. But the question is very important. Are you going to get involved with the same old thing?
Right.
So one of the things you don't want to do is to repeat the mistakes of the past. You want new mistakes. Or you want to fully resolve old mistakes. So I think the answer is you got to do both. It's worth holding on to bridges if they're not completely burned yet. You want to burn them all the way down to ashes, and then they're finished. And if they're not all the way done, don't abandon them. I mean, I think I would fault my two ex-wives in that they both didn't fulfill their own needs, and they went on to make the same mistakes again. People say this about relationships, that you have to work at it. And it's true. It's an evolving thing. So part of evolving is reconciling, cremating, burying, or reviving. What's worth keeping, what's worth throwing away. I guess my answer in these relationships is that there's many parts to every person, and some parts are worth keeping, and some parts aren't. You may not get to decide what part of somebody else you get to keep and discard, but you have to have the vision in yourself. I tell this also to my clients. You have to envision something before you can make it real. So, if you want to travel, you've got to envision traveling. If you want relationships, you've got to envision relationships. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing, and your chances of success are probably low. People who go to bars to meet people probably have low chances of meeting the right people, unless that's the kind of person you want to meet, I suppose. So it takes, like just the other night I went to what's effectively a bar. It's a meetup for entrepreneurs. But I met somebody I talked to who said something useful. I figured, okay, I didn't get a parking ticket. I didn't have to waste money on expensive alcohol, and I didn't spend too much time. So that's a success. I made two contacts. I don't know if they're worth anything, but they were sincere people. Okay, I guess you could do that at a bar too, if you were skilled. This was essentially a bar. I didn't want to go, but I forced myself to go, knowing that it could have been a bust. But since I spent so much time holed up in my little home office working all the time, I figured, part of my service to the community was to put myself out. I mean, in a sense, it was a service. I was willing to waste my time if I could help somebody by saying something interesting.
Well, I think that going out is a service to your community. I don't really think that anyone can be their best self, locked up in their house all day long, not interacting or talking to anybody ever. I think that most people have something of value to share with other people, and those people would appreciate that connection, like perhaps the other two people that you met at the bar the other day. But Lincoln, we got to wrap things up here. But before we do, I'm on your website here, mindstrengthbalance.com. You got a lot of stuff on your website: psychotherapy, medical support, neural training, coaching, sleep, which is a big thing for me. What all are you offering on your website? Like what if people go to your website, what do you most want them to take away from it?
I don't know if they'll take it away from my website, but I want people to know that it's worth to try to work at things. So whatever your thing is, if it's sleep, if it's medical healing, if it's psychotherapy, if it's learning, to me all these things are part of the same bag. You said sleep was an issue, so I should send you my book on sleep.
I would love to read it. I will read your book on sleep.
Okay.
Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it is. I'll just say sleep. Yeah. So, that's just a whole other topic. But I think it's part of the whole becoming balanced. I mean, to use that analogy of jumping out of an airplane, you've got to be balanced. You've got to have your head together. You've got to have your equipment together. You've got to have your plan. Your expectations have to be appropriate. You have to have some backup. And then when it comes to jumping out the door, it's just a small step because everything else has been built around it. So I would say the same about doing something in your older age. If you have the other stuff in place, you're just looking for an opportunity, and it's not going to be a great risk. If you have a sense of value and something you can offer, you're just looking for a place where you can deliver it, where it will be accepted or respected or made positive use of. One of the things I would like to do more, but I don't, is mentor young kids. I mean, like adolescents, because I think that's an important stage of your life where you're making a lot of decisions and you're not given a lot of power or respect, but you have a lot of insight and attention. But people aren't encouraged to find mentors when they're adolescents. I don't know if you did. Well, it sounds like you did, because you were a part of that vocal group at age 12.
Yeah, age 8 to 12. But actually, that's actually one thing. What they used to just said is very amazing to me. I've never wanted to jump out of an airplane. To me, that's like why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? But and you just said, like, he's just walking out the door, and I think to me, like that's like it's about all of your existence is basically here between your two ears, right? And like, why would I be afraid of jumping out that airplane? Why would I be afraid to go out to a bar, to a business meeting, to meet a few people? Why would anybody be afraid to grow, to take that step? So strangely enough, Lincoln, I think I'm going to go jump out of an airplane right now. I think not right now, but I think that I've always said I wouldn't do it, and actually now I think I need to do it. I think I need to jump out of an airplane.
It's not just about the airplane, it's about the people you meet when you're doing it.
Right, sure.
Feel, I mean, this is you'll find out when you get there. The way they train you is they have you jump off a ladder onto a bunch of mattresses. And that's all it is. It's like jumping off a ladder onto a bunch of mattresses. But where else would you be surrounded by 100 miles of space in all directions.
Right.
It only lasts for a minute, but it's unique.
Right. And then if you die, you're going to die anyway. And
You're not going to
also,
die.
I love what you just said. Like, the point of death is so that it makes you live, right? Like it gives it gives impetus to actually living. So I really love that. So if people want to get a hold of you, Lincoln, to talk about any of these things, psychotherapy, medical support, neural training, coaching, sleep, physics, God knows what, hallucinogenics, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? There's on your website, they can request a calendar appointment, or should they just email you or text you, or what's the best way for people to reach out to you and talk about this kind of stuff?
Well, on the website, you can ask a question. You can book a free consult. You can go to my, subscribe to my blog, and you can read my books. And
how many books have you written?
A dozen. So
a dozen.
The book I liked the most was the first I wrote, which was about learning, for which I went and interviewed people of all ages in all fields of interest and asked them how did they learn and why. And it's a great book because I talked to, lawbreakers and Nobel laureates and teenagers and people in their 90s, and they were all inspired and inspiring people. And I actually put that book online. You can get it in HTML free online, just as pages, as web pages. But you can also buy it as a hardback book called The Learning Project. Anyway, so the answer was go to mindstrengthbalance.com. And yeah, you can email me, or you can set up a free appointment or subscribe to the free blog. It depends what your issue is. And my final message is just do something.
Just do something. You're like that Dos Equis, man. You know that commercial, right? I don't drink beer all the time, but what I do, I drink Dos Equis or whatever it is. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, because I don't drink beer.
I'll look that up. Anyway, it's a meme actually, but it's a very wise. Basically the idea is that very wise guy, and anyway. I don't even know what the point of it is, but you kind of remind me of him, and believe me, it's a good thing. All right, well, listen, I got to go, but I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast today, and I'd love to have you back maybe to talk about sleep or like any of these other things, You could be like a recurring guest on 60 Plus Uncensored. I really think it would be... I think it'd be very interesting to have you on again and again, and maybe like a co-host once in a while, I just think you'd be perfect for it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about past life regression. That's one of the most exciting things.
Let's talk about that next time. Past life regression. Okay, but I got to split. Listen, Lincoln, thank you so very much for being on the podcast today. I truly do appreciate it, and I will catch you on the flip side.
Okay. See you, Seb. Bye-bye.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. Huge thanks to Lincoln Stoller for joining me today. And as always, if you got something out of this episode, share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. Subscribe, leave a review, and come find us at team60plus.com. I'm Seb Frey. Stay strong, stay curious, and I'll catch you on the next episode of 60 Plus Uncensored.
Subscribe now.